arrived. I wondered when I'd find you here. Welcome. This has been a long time coming for both of us. I've been wanting to do this for a really long time. Start an ASMR channel. I began watching ASMR back in college. A friend recommended it to me. Honestly, at the time it was kind of a joke, but I really took to it. I've always struggled to fall asleep at night. We're talking 1 to 2 hours on average. And by the looks of things, I think you and I may be in the same boat there. You've been working really, really hard for a really long time. So have I. And I think it's far time that you got some rest. You're in the right place. Welcome. I'd like to invite you to sit back and enjoy the first official video of Ben Talks ASMR. To commence our relationship, I'd like to do something a little bit unique. I would like to utter 25 inspirational quotes about life, work, and relationships. And in each of these quotes, I'd like to give my very brief, very humble 2 cents on what I think my interpretations of those quotes are. And I think it would be really fun if you gave your interpretation of what those quotes mean to you in your life. Maybe even write your ideas in the comment section. We could get a fun little conversation going. But without further ado, let's jump right in. Quote number 1. Enjoy the little things in life, for one day you will look back and realize that those were the big things. This is by an author named Robert Brault. I heard this quote for the first time when I graduated college about 3 years ago, and I thought it was very, very applicable at the time because, you know, you graduate college and you've spent the last 4 years, maybe even a little longer depending on the degree that you got, studying for exams, trying to get the best grades possible. And the same thing can be applied to later in life, whether you're running a business, working a job, making money. You know, you spend all this time trying to get the best grade you can, ace that interview. But if we're being honest with ourselves, when we look back in 10 to 15 years, maybe we remember that presentation, interview, or exam. But if we're being completely honest with ourselves, we're probably going to remember the fun times we had with friends, family, and loved ones. Those little moments that in retrospect are really the big moments. I love it. Quote number 2. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail, by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Similar to the path not taken quote, but it's really about the difference between following a syllabus in life, working a regular 9-to-5 job, maybe running, or versus potentially maybe doing something more entrepreneurial, creative, maybe even creating jobs for others, creating other opportunities, building something of your own. A lot of wisdom there too. Quote number 3. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, by John Lennon. I love quotes from musicians. I'm a musician myself, and I love to see and hear other musicians bring wisdom into the world, not just through song, but it also turns out that a lot of really great musicians are really wise people too. I think this quote is really about living in the moment, when you're busy making other plans. Life passes you by. And when are you not going to be making plans? There's always something going on, right? But sometimes when you stop to smell the roses, you realize, again, going back full circle to number one, that in 10, 15, 20 years, you're probably not going to remember that plan. You'll remember the memory. Quote number 4. Life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. By George Bernard Shaw. Life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. This reminds me of a really interesting concept that Professor Scott Galloway, who's a famous marketing professor at NYU Stern School of Business, he talks about the idea that people don't find their passion. You discover your passion by becoming really good at something. You don't just find yourself. You don't decide one day that you like doing stuff. You have to do it to discover whether that is something that you're good at or something that you enjoy. I mean, for example, this is my first ASMR video. I have to do this many times to decide whether it's something I actually want to continue, which I think it will be. I'm already enjoying myself rambling right now, but the idea that you don't just think of what your passion or purpose is, you have to find it through action. I like that one. Quote number 5. The harder you work, the luckier you get. By Mark Cuban. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Mark Cuban. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Quote number 6. To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, and that is all. By Oscar Wilde. It's a sad quote, but unfortunately true. Most people go through the motions, go to school, go to college, get a 9-to-5, and if you think about it, those things could be things that you enjoy. Hopefully you enjoy your job, at least to an extent. But that's 45 hours of your week. That's probably over half your life. Whether you're working for yourself, living a more chaotic, sporadic life, or for someone else, either way you can still make time for friends, family, to make memories. Make sure you're living, not just existing. It's hard to do sometimes. Especially when shit hits the fan. Oscar Wilde. Quote number 7. In the end, we only regret the chances we didn't take. By Lewis Carroll. In the end, we only regret the chances we didn't take. I mean, I hear so many quotes from famous, renowned influencers these days, especially people like Gary Vaynerchuk, who say, when you're on your deathbed at the end of your life, it's good to have a goal to have little to no regrets. We all have some regrets. It's a very high bar to muster, but I think regret minimization is a good goal to strive for. Something to keep in mind. Quote number 8. Success usually comes to those who are too busy to be looking for it. Henry David Thoreau. Success usually comes to those who are too busy to be looking for it. The idea that in order to find success, usually happens when you're least expecting it, and when you're working really hard already. I've actually found that in my own life, to be honest. Albeit I'm still pretty early in my journey. Quote 9. I love this one. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. By William Shakespeare. So short and sweet. I think oftentimes the best quotes are the ones that are short and sweet. I love the part where they say trust a few. It really accentuates the idea that people that you find in your life, their trust needs to be earned. And I think oftentimes people find that out too late. But you can still love all. Doesn't mean you have to trust them, as long as you do wrong to none. Love it. Quote 10. Another short and sweet one. You miss every shot you don't take. By Wayne Gretzky. See, I always thought Michael Jordan patented that quote. I know he said it many times, but I guess technically Wayne Gretzky was the one who originated it. I'll let them duel it out. Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky, if you guys are watching right now, let me know in the comments. It'd be interesting to know. The idea that you gotta take chances on yourself. The more repetitions you take, the statistically higher likelihood that you'll land that big success. And you really only need to be right one time. Love it. Quote number 11. In the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. The Beatles. Another music quote. And I love how it's from the entire band. It'd be funny to know which one of the Beatles actually thought of that one. I bet Paul McCartney says that he's the one who did, but I guess we'll never know. The idea of love and reciprocity, what you put out into the world, is usually equivalent to what you get back. What's that science quote? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It's kind of like karma, you know? But you can also talk about that in the context of love and other emotions too. What you put out into the world is oftentimes what you get back. Food for thought. Food for thought. Quote number 12. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. By Walt Disney. Hashtag this ASMR channel. That's all I'll say about that. Although talking and doing in this case are very much in tandem with one another. Quote number 13. The greatest glory in living lies not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall. By Nelson Mandela. I love this quote. I have a personal passion for Nelson Mandela because my dad, fun fact, my dad is actually from South Africa. He was born in Botswana and moved to Durban, South Africa when he was 3. And he met my mom when I think he was 23 because she was in the Peace Corps down in South Africa. They later moved to the United States, got married at 25 and had me. Fun little aside, but Nelson Mandela's a man that I really, really respect. It's so crazy to think that my dad was living literally one generation ahead of me during an apartheid state. It's just crazy because you think that racism and that kind of thing was something that ended back in the 60s, but not in every part of the world. I love this quote. I'll say it one more time because I went on a bit of a longer ramble that time. The greatest glory in living lies not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall. I love it. Quote number 14. Choose a job you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. By Confucius. I have to argue a bit with this one. I don't care what job you take. There's always going to be times where you have to work and do things that you don't like, and not every part of every job is enjoyable. You could be an NBA basketball player or an NFL player. You probably don't enjoy waking up at 5 or 6 in the morning and lifting weights most of the time. You don't have to agree with every one of these. Let me know what you think in the comments. Quote number 15. I didn't fail. I simply discovered 1,000 ways how not to build a light bulb. By Thomas Edison. I think everyone knows this one. The idea that reframing failure in your mind to, when you don't hit the mark, think about it as a lesson that you learned that will help propel you to that success. Every failure is a stepping stone, and even if it takes 1,000 times, you only need to get it right one time to change the world, or should I say, to light up the world like a light bulb. Quote number 16. We should not feel embarrassed by our difficulties, but only by our failure to grow anything beautiful from them. 𝗯𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗶. We should not feel embarrassed by our difficulties, but only by our failure to grow anything beautiful from them. Very similar to the last one, right? But more detailed in the sense that don't feel embarrassed by what you're going through. Only be embarrassed if you don't learn a lesson from them. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, if you think about the hardest experience you ever went through, barring maybe something super tragic that was completely out of your control, but if you think about most of your really hard times in life, if you're being honest with yourself, if we are being honest with ourselves, there's going to be some lessons that we learned from that. And it makes those difficulties beautiful in retrospect. 𝗯𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗶. Quote number 17. We're almost to the end here. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Or a woman, of course. By Bruce Lee. I think everyone's heard this quote before, or most of everyone has heard this quote. I love this one because it really gets down to the idea of quality over quantity. There's this kind of known falsehood. There's this cliche quote that practice makes perfect. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. I've been a trumpet player since I was 8 years old, and I can tell you that that's very, very true. Also kind of the idea that a master of all is a master of none. You know, you can really only be really good at one or two things, at least at one time in your life. Practice one kick 10,000 times, and you'll be really, really good at that one kick. What is your kick? Think about that. Quote number 18. Courage. Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point, by C.S. Lewis. The idea that your virtues, you don't really know them until they're tested in extreme situations. We like to think that we live courageously, but we don't really know until we have to be courageous. C.S. Lewis. Quote number 19. Another really short and sweet one. Don't count the days. Make the days count. By Muhammad Ali. Don't count the days. Make the days count. Basically, the idea is to not procrastinate. You'd be amazed what you can get done in a day when you put your mind to it. I love this one. This one's short and arguably maybe even sweeter, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Quote number 20. One day, or day one. One day, or day one, by Paulo Coelho. I don't know who that is, but I think a lot of people know this quote. Again, I'll go back to saying, hashtag this ASMR channel. We went from one day I'll start it to this is day one of Ben Talks ASMR. And I thank you again for being here. Quote number 21. Life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it. 𝗯𝗲𝗴𝗶. Life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it, by 𝗯𝗲𝗴𝗶. I'd say that's very true in 90 to 95% of most difficulties in life. Most things. The idea that, you can still be happy even going through the hardest times of your life. It's amazing. Amazing what the human mind and body can endure if you simply reframe the challenges that you're going through. Oftentimes in 4 to 5 years, you look back and you laugh at those instances. A lot of wisdom in that one. Quote number 22. We're down to our last 4 quotes. Quote 22. It's never too late to be what you might have been. George Eliot. It's never too late to be what you might have been. Because you can still be that person. I love it. I love how it dismantles ageism too. You're never too old to start. Remember that. Or too young. Quote number 23. Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain. Unknown. I don't know who wrote this quote. Love this one. The idea that, kind of similar to the last one, or maybe the one before that, where when you're going through a storm, the most powerful thing you can do is stay happy regardless of what life throws at you. Because there's always going to be challenges. Even in the happiest time of your life that you can remember, there were still things that you had to worry about. If we didn't know how to dance in the rain, we might never be able to be happy. Let me know what you think. Quote number 24. Who you work with is more important than what you work on, which is more important than how hard you work. Another unknown. I'll say it one more time. Who you work with is more important than what you work on, which is more important than how hard you work. I love this quote especially, and it reminds me of a business that I ran fairly recently. And it encapsulates a lot of what I learned in that experience. But that's a story for another day. Another day, another video. But really highlights the idea that who you work with is really the most important thing. Food for thought. And our final quote, and my personal favorite, quote number 25. Don't be afraid to start over. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. Unknown. But my favorite one, don't be afraid to start from scratch. Excuse me. Don't be afraid to start over. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. And that is all. I hope that was an enjoyable debut video for you. And I hope this was a relaxing experience. I hope it gave you some ideas. I'd love to hear those ideas in the comments. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye now.